Again, welcome everyone. So nice to have you here. I hope you enjoyed that song. As I said, that was a song by Dolly Parton called Rainbow Land that was recently banned in Wisconsin. And part of this culture wars we're living through. So we're going to lift up Dolly and celebrate Rainbow Land. I know we have some new friends on the call today, so welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. We'll definitely try to loop you in as we go with some of the background information. And I know we also have some of our partners in state join in as well. So for y'all, let me just tell you, we're taking a high level look today. We're going to do some of our takeaways, and then we're also developing written deep dives by state, and we'll send that to you once we have all the data. All right, everybody, so happy to be together. The last time we were together was in December. The midterms had just happened, and we were really just starting to figure out what occurred. We looked at our election needs survey and our CNN analysis. Over the last few months, we've been able to take the time to go deeper into our own data, invited outside experts to kick the tires on our research. And then also we've been waiting on and starting to analyze the verified voting data that comes in from each state. And so we set this call at the end of Q1 to kind of come back with you all, reflect on 22 as we're beginning to really gear up and move into 23 and 24. The big takeaway is that it is verified. We have approved. We had incredible success moving moderate white women towards progress in 2022. And we're super well positioned to keep doing that as we move forward. As you know, the way that we do that is through research, persuasion, and then vote choice work. We go deep in the research to understand our audience. Our Galvanize USA and Galvanize Action both do issue-based education. We do work on what do we expect from our government. And then my independent PAC does work on who is the candidate that you have in front of you now, that really reflects your values and that we encourage you to vote for. So that's kind of the approach we take. And what you can see on this next slide is the success we had in the 3 states that we worked in, that my PAC worked on the actual Senate races. And so here, I'm just so excited to share this with you. When we last met, it was right after the midterms. We just had that early evidence, and we could see from the early evidence that white women outperformed, that where we worked, white women outperformed the national average. That was a great metric. We're happy to have it, but it didn't prove that we actually were the cause of the movement. And as you all know, and I know you appreciate about us, we try to be super honest with ourselves. We try to evaluate our program, say like, are we actually, is what we're doing working? If it's not, how do we change it? If it is, how do we keep tweaking it to make it better? So we took undertook seriously rigorous research all last year to evaluate our programs and check to see, is what we're doing causing statistically significant movement, both on issues and on ultimately through the PAC on vote choice. So I'm going to go through the details in just a second, but the big takeaway is that we do have this concrete evidence that our persuasion programs were highly successful at moving white women towards progress. You can see that on this slide. It shows you in each state, the teal color is the treatment group, and then the blue color shows the control, and you can see the significant improvement among the folks that we talked to. So let me walk you through how we know that. We engaged in a 7-month-long in-field randomized control trial, and we did that to measure our impact with women in the course of their real lives. So you've probably heard us talk a lot previously about the research that we do in the lab, where we show them an ad versus a placebo, and we check to see if the messages work, if the ads work. But this 7-month-long survey was really looking at talking to women over time in their real lives to see if we could connect and move them. For those of you who are a little bit less familiar with randomized control trials, here's the basics. We start with a similar group of white women in the state. We divide them in half randomly. 1,000 of them were in our control group and they did not see our ads, so we blocked them from seeing any of our work. 1,000 of them were in our treatment group, and they get sent the suite of ads over time. So starting in early May, Galvanize USA was sending them ads talking about how they feel about different issues. At some point, Galvanize Action started sending this same group of people stuff about how they feel about government, what they expect from their public officials. And then we split, and later on, the PAC started sending that group stuff about who was running in the particular race and what the PAC thought would be the better candidate. So Galvanize Action surveyed that same group of women every 2 weeks from May through the election, right? So before the Dobbs leak through the election, and we asked everybody the same questions. We asked them, who do you blame on abortion? We asked them, what do you expect around reproductive freedom? Ultimately, who do you plan to vote for? And when we're doing that work, we're hoping to see the results like this, that the treatment group, the ones that get all of our messages, do better than the group that doesn't. And so we compare that, and that's how we evaluate our impact. What we found through our research was unusually strong impact that was significantly higher than average. We just saw in the last slide, each state in particular, across all these states, we saw 8.3 percentage point movement. So the folks who we talked to were 8.3 percentage points more likely to vote for the Dem Senate candidate than the group that we didn't talk to, who were otherwise exactly the same women, right? We also saw they were 8.6 percentage points less likely to blame Biden or Democrats for inflation and to place that blame on the greedy rich or corporations. And they're 5 percentage points more likely to say that officials should protect our right to abortion. So across the board, we're seeing real success in moving the folks we talk to in the direction we want them to go on the issues and what they expect from their government. We had a couple of outside experts dig in and validate our work. You know, again, we want to make sure that we're getting it right. And if we have any blind spots, we want to know about that. So the Analyst Institute took a look at our work at the end of last year. They ended up giving us an XP award and said that our impact was unprecedented. And they called our experiment a model for the field. Again, saying we study there that our the net impact is more than 10 times greater than what you would expect normally. Then Brockman and Kalla, the researchers who are known for successfully evaluating the impact of deep canvassing, they asked if they could review it. They did an independent analysis. They were able to review all the data, verify the results, and they just came out with a report saying this is one of the few persuasion studies from 2022 finding clearly statistically significant effects on vote choice. In their analysis, they estimated the cost per net vote at $87.29. If that is if cost per net vote is a new number for you, that is bananas good. I sent it to a friend at the White House, and the response was wow. Because if you see anything, if you're looking at 100, you're happy. So this is really good. So that's all looking at what does our data show, what do we find? We also have been looking at the voter file data as that has been released from the different states. So far we have voter file data back from Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin, but we don't have it back from Pennsylvania yet. We hoped we would by now, but we don't. So what we're going to do is share with you all the data that we can today. If you're a casual observer of elections, what you usually rely on is the exit polls, right? That's what comes out first. We all know it's not quite right, but it's the best we can do. So we always give the caveats that it's not perfect, but this is what we have. Then all the folks who are experts and in the field wait anxiously for each state to send out their verified voting data in the months after the election. And what that data does is show us who voted, but not how, right? Of course, because the voting is secret ballot. So it tells us if you voted, if you voted in the primary versus in the general. It also helps us to see what your partisanship score is. And so while we can't see exactly who you voted for, what we do see is data that's combined that looks at vote history, voter registration, consumer data, news consumption, right? All that together gets pushed together into a partisanship score, which is how the field assesses the likelihood that you're of which party you're going to vote for or have voted for. We take that and combine it with our research, right? So we did a election eve research survey of our women and said, hey, did you vote? How did you vote? What did who did you vote for? And then we can look at this data and say, oh, is that accurate? Did they actually vote? And that helps us to build into our own analysis and research. This is really for us a continuous cycle of learning. This was our first midterm, right? We're just having our 5-year birthday. So we played in the 2020 presidential. We just played in this midterms. We're continuing to learn about the women in the states we work in, about their voting and what they care about. So we see this as just a good practice to make sure the theories we have are proved out or that we can amend them. So one of the most important things that comes out of the voter file data is partisanship. So what you're seeing here is that overall, voters are being pulled to the right. Nationally, white women shifted right, as did all other voting blocks based on gender and ethnicity. This slide shows women. I'll show you men next. When you look at the slide, how you read it is if you look at how white women did, there's a net shift. It's a -8 of how they moved from Democrats towards Republicans. And so you can think about this as moving away from progress by 4 percentage points. If you look at the other groups of women on this slide, what you're seeing is that just like white women, you're also seeing that move. And you can see the net shift down there at the bottom. You're seeing the net shift by white women, by Black women, and by Latinas. Apologies for not going further into other demographics. This is the data that we had available to us for this presentation. And so you can see that movement, which is interesting because we're hearing a lot, and at least in progressive circles, right? You're hearing a lot about Americans rejecting extreme positions of the right. And while that is true in some places, in some states, it's important to keep a reality check on what does this data show nationally about how American voters are doing. So we're seeing a shift to the right here with women. And then if you look at the next slide, you'll see the same thing with men. And it's fairly consistent within demographic groups. So the white men shifting similar to white women, et cetera. So part of what we're looking at is why are we seeing this partisan shift? And what we see in our research very clearly is that part of that shift for our women is being created by the culture wars that they're being inundated with, that we're seeing that the crime, the backlash to equity and education, fear mongering, anti-immigrant sentiments, all of that stuff we see having an effect in pulling folks towards the right, towards strongman authoritarianism. So part of our work is to address, inoculate against and address that those culture wars and that backlash, because we see them working to drag folks to the right. I'm going to now take us through a quick look at the 4 states that we have deep dive data on. Pennsylvania is the first one. This is the one state that hasn't released its voter file data yet that we're looking at today. So what I'm going to walk you through here is our own research combined with that exit poll data. Everyone remembers that this was the big hope for the Senate, and it was a very, very close race. According to exit polls, as you see here, white women chose Fetterman 51 to Oz 48. When we look through our data, what we see is that the success of this in this race was, for us, was by talking to women about the range of issues that were most important to them. So for persuadable women, we really did need to talk to them about the range of issues. When we asked people, what's the most important issue to you? What's your top issue? The biggest group of women that we talked to said the economy. The second biggest group of women said crime. The fourth biggest group said abortion. That doesn't mean abortion wasn't important in this race. It definitely was. But it's really important to think about, to hold a nuanced view on this. Because in Pennsylvania, abortion was viewed as being under threat. Right, that it was a very clear message that if we didn't have a pro-choice governor, that abortion was under threat in that state, and that because of that, there was a real sense of significance, and we saw that in both the gubernatorial race and the Senate race. Abortion was also a polarizing issue because the candidates were so far apart on it. We saw that in both levels, gubernatorial and Senate, the candidates were really in different places on abortion. So it was a place where we could define the candidates and talk to voters about what they wanted. We identified this race, and really all of our races, as abortion because what we saw was it really played out differently with different segments of our movable white women. So we identified some segments of movable white women who there was room for them to move on abortion. Our more conservative women, we actually saw we were able to persuade them by statistically significant margins to get them to say, my representatives should act to protect abortion rights. All right, and so they were responding to that, and we were able to move them on that. And so that was important. But we also witnessed a fairly big segment, and actually in most of our states, this more liberal group of persuadable women is the biggest segment. For those women, they tend to be older, they tend to already be pro-choice, so they were already pretty much at a ceiling on abortion when Dobbs came down. They believed in reproductive freedom, that was important to them. But it wasn't as galvanizing for them as an issue as we expected it to be, and as it certainly was for young women and for the base, right? So what we saw for them, from Dobbs straight through the election, they said they were pro-choice and it should be protected. But we also saw that they could be moved to the right by culture wars, and specifically we saw that them moving around things like crime. That feeling of being insecure and unsafe was a pain point that they were sensitive to. And even though they were pro-choice, we saw movement to the right. So for them, we needed to validate, shore up the importance of abortion and address these other concerns they have. I'm hearing folks, argue about, is it economy or is it abortion? And what advice is being given to candidates? I just had a call yesterday with someone saying that, what should they be talking about? And I think the answer is, you shouldn't be asking is it either or. At least for persuadable women voters, it is both and. You have to take a multi-issue approach that shores up the things that they're strong on and that addresses their weaknesses, their sensitivities that we are witnessing them being dragged to the right on. And so that's the approach that we took. Two other quick points on Pennsylvania was just the really importance of steady long-term engagement. We were in there for months talking with these folks. We really saturated the suburbs, especially on the economy and abortion. And about a fifth of our segments are in those Northampton, Chester, Bucks County, Monroe, Montgomery counties, right? Looking at those suburbs. And what we saw was in those suburbs, a lot of positive movement, a lot of progress there. So ongoing conversation with folks in a way that meets them on the issues they're worried about and their values worked. The last thing I will say about Pennsylvania is Fetterman won the state by a wider margin than Biden did in 2020. So when we're thinking about 2024, we want to look at Fetterman outperformed Biden in 10 counties. And even where he lost, Fetterman outperformed Biden in 8 out of 10 of the rural counties. So he was doing better than Biden. I'm flagging that for us because next year we're going to have likely Biden presidential candidate. At least one Senate seat is up for sure. And based on what, depending on what happens with Senator Fetterman, we may end up seeing 2 Senate seats up. So definitely want to keep doing this work on an ongoing basis, talking with our women in these states, helping them make sense of everything that's going on in their lives, and being a part of their lives now, not in the fall of 2024. Okay, I want to look ahead to Michigan. Here I want to look at what happened when abortion was literally on the ballot, right? So in Pennsylvania, it was definitely a threat and people talked about it a lot. In Michigan, it was, we had the ballot initiative proposal 3, and so it's literally on the ballot. In this case, Galvanize Action made, I think, excellent ads in support of abortion. As you know, every single ad we put out is tested first as a message, then we make the ad, then we test the ad. Then if the ad performs well with our segments, then we send it to the field. That is part of our success. And that was mentioned by Brockman and Kalla, that part of the reason we had such unprecedented persuasion effect was because everything we do, we only send out the things that we're highly confident will work. So in Michigan, that was, we made a direct ad buy running our ads, and then we also gave money to partners in state for them to run ads. And that helped to win. White women on Prop 3 were 57-43, so 57 in favor of reproductive freedom, 43 against. This is on track, just slightly higher than the overall electorate. So I want to take a look, though, about what happened in Michigan around turnout and on partisanship, right? So first, on turnout, white women and white men turned out at roughly the same rates in 22 as they did in 2018. So 2018 at the time was a record high turnout midterm. It was people across the board responding to what happened in 2016 and folks really being galvanized to, engage. And so 2018 was the highest. And then in 2022, white women and white men turned out actually about the same rate, right? So that's, I think, a good thing. And what we're seeing there in that terms of heightened engagement is continued responsiveness to what's happening in the world, to wanting to defeat election deniers, and definitely to responding to what's happening with abortion. So we saw about the same turnout there. As a result of this maintaining, well, that's what white folks did. People of color actually decreased their turnout a little bit from 2018 to 22. That was true for people of color overall and for women of color in particular. So women of color decreased by about 4 percentage points over time. So if white folks hold steady and people of color decrease a little bit, what you see is white women turned out 5 percentage points more than the overall electorate in 22 in Michigan. So if white women turn out 5 percentage points more, and they represent about, I think it's 42% of the electorate there, that really is going to be an issue, right, for the ultimate outcome. The specific group of moderate women who we talked to increased their turnout from 2018 to 2022. So white women overall were pretty steady. The group that we talked to increased their turnout by 4.2 percentage points. So that's the turnout story. Let's look at partisanship, and that's what's here on your screen. The good news on partisanship is that we see Michigan's bucking the trend a little bit compared to the national story. So here you see both white women and white men move towards Dems in Michigan. White women move the most, about 2.4 percentage points compared to from 2018 to now. So that's exciting to see a difference and how white folks turned out in Michigan, or their partisanship in Michigan. White women did the best, white men second. What you do see here is folks of color are moving to the right in Michigan as well. So this is along what we're seeing nationally. So that's troubling. And I want us to always keep in mind that where did people start, right? So white women moved towards Dems by 2.4 percentage points. That's fantastic. What that meant in this race was that white women voted for the Democrat 52.8%, right? So the small majority of white women voted Democrat. That's success, very happy. And in a state where they do make up 42.3% of the vote share, that's good news. For women of color, or for folks of color, generally, we're seeing them move to the right, but they also started so much higher in favor of Democrats that for women of color, those who turned out went 95% for the Democrat. And women of color went 90% for the abortion ballot initiative. So we have a turnout issue. When we do see folks turn out, we're seeing extraordinarily high levels of support for the Democrats. Okay, so that is Michigan, and looking at what is going on in the state, both when abortion's on the ballot, I should just mention the upside of folks remaining galvanized, turning out at those levels, and moving to the white folks moving slightly left, is that we did see success on the ballot across the board. So Governor Whitmer was reelected. White women voted for her by 55%, just slightly less than they voted for the ballot initiative. The Attorney General was reelected. The Secretary of State was reelected. So really good news in terms of that down ballot effects, and potentially for the open Senate seat in 2024. So we have, that's an open seat. We'll definitely be looking at our future in Michigan there. For my fellow Wolverines, I'll just end Michigan with a hearty go blue. Okay, so let's move into Ohio. Ohio is a little bit of a horse of a different color. We went into Ohio last year because we wanted to explore how we could do in a slightly more conservative state, right? So unlike the other three that are really neck and neck, Ohio is significantly more red than those. And so we wanted to see, with more conservative, persuadable women, how could we do? We spent a significant amount of time getting to know the state, talking with women. My Galvanize Action did lots of conversations with them about issues, framing their views on economy and on abortion. When my PAC got involved later, my PAC decided to test an opportunity of trying to flip one of the districts. So we worked in, my PAC, the One for All Committee, worked in Ohio 1. And as a result of our engagement with our partners there, that was one of only 9 House races that were flipped for Democrats. That's really important. It keeps the House margins tight. And we were super excited to see the success when we worked in that kind of a nested race. I like to think of Ohio as a once and future battleground. So getting to continue to know these women and see how we can connect with them on which issues matters. What we saw there for women who were in our persuasion universe, again, economy is the thing folks say was their top concern. When we say, what's the thing that is most important to you, your top issue, economy is that most people say economy. In Ohio, it's the second most people say healthcare, the third most say crime, and the fourth largest group says abortion. With economy being high here, what I want to lift up 2 things is, one, in Ohio, we did a lot of work around economy. We have some great volunteers who do ads with us in Ohio. They were talking about economy, inflation, child tax credit. With those ads, we ended up moving our treatment group by 11 percentage points to reduce the blame they placed on Biden and the Democrats for inflation. We use that as a measure of success because you can't tell people that they're not hurting, right? Folks are feeling economic pain. The issue isn't, are they feeling it or not? The issue is going to be who do they blame for it, and who would they be willing to look to for success, and who they can vote for. on abortion, we had a significant movement with traditionalist conservatives. So that's our more conservative group of voters within our persuasion universe. We saw they found abortion to be a top issue, right? They had more way to go, more room for movement on abortion. And when we talked with them about it in a way that resonated with them, we saw significant movement for them on that issue. So that's a real model for future, and especially in more conservative states where that share of the more conservative persuadables exists. It's much bigger in Ohio than it is like in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, that segment of our persuadables is much smaller. Okay, so let's talk about Wisconsin. Before we do, I'm going to plug my computer in because I don't want to lose you. Okay, so Wisconsin, everyone, Wisconsin was a heartbreaker. We're so close. As you all remember, that was it's a state where Barnes lost by 27,000 votes, which is very similar to the margin by which Biden won in 2020. He won by about 21,000 votes, right? So this is the truest battleground state, super narrow margins, often thought of as the tipping point state. In Wisconsin, we were there early. Gallo was talking to women about issues, what to expect from the public officials, really going in deep on these, how their values, what's important to them, what do they care about. And then at some point, Galvanize USA and Galvanize Action, we have to stop that work, that kind of issue-specific work. You can't be talking to folks about that right before an election because you don't want to make it electioneering. So you need to stop that kind of conversation, and then you start. Then my PAC comes in and talks to them quite separately about what's going on in the election, right? So what I think that Wisconsin highlights for us is the importance of year-round conversations with voters in an ongoing way, and then earlier investment with the political conversation. This is a story of trying to hold folks steady, right? So we had tiny margins of Biden victory in 2020. What our hope was to try to keep the folks in Wisconsin steady and maybe gain a tiny bit. What you see from this slide is overall for the electorate, folks are moving right, just like nationally, right? We're seeing folks move to the right. For white women here, you can see that they also move to the right. They move the more conservative direction, but by a smaller margin than the other demographic segments. So that's interesting. It's important. White women are a huge segment of the Wisconsin electorate. And this is an opportunity here that we are able, they're almost 48% of the electorate in Wisconsin. So it's really important that we're able to slow that move. And actually what we saw with the group of women that we talked to, so our treatment group we had the reverse effect. We moved our treatment group 11.8 percentage points towards progress, right? So that's critical. That's part of why you see white women not moving as much to the right, because when we're in there talking with these persuadable women, we were able to move them significantly towards progress. And again, that's validated through the research. So how did we do it? We talked to them about the stuff that they said they cared most about: economy, healthcare, abortion, crime. What we saw in Wisconsin was that the crime narrative was very, very significant. It was a factor in some of these older pro-choice women. And it was something that we needed to be working on and talking to them about, or to at least inoculate or make that less salient for them, and to instead talk to them, have them focus their energies on what is happening in these other areas and what folks can do for them to support them. So not to ignore it, and not to pretend like their fears aren't real, but to help them hold it, and think about, basically shape their perspective. So let me show you how we're applying some of that learning right now. As many of you know, there is an important judicial race happening in Wisconsin. It's a Supreme Court race. That Supreme Court was 4-3 conservative. A conservative is retiring, and so this seat is going to make the decision on what's the balance of power in that Supreme Court in a in a state where abortion is banned, and the court will likely make a decision on it, in a state where gerrymandering has absolutely negatively impacted the will of the people. So you see results happening in the state that are inconsistent with what the voters say they want because of gerrymandering. In a state that is so close for the future of the presidential election and could easily be the tipping point for 2024. So, important race. My PAC was invited to come in there. We were not planning to work in this race, but folks were concerned that neither of the pro-choice, pro-democracy candidates were going to survive the primary. And so we were approached, and my PAC was asked to come in and help in that primary. So fortunately, we're at the place now in our organizational sophistication that when we were presented with that opportunity, we were poised to say, yes, we can move quickly. We were able to quickly do an analysis, test the messages, figure out what messages would work best. Some of the ones that we thought might work, like saying that this is going to affect the balance of power in the Supreme Court, didn't work with the persuasion audience. But would work for you, which is why I used it for you. It didn't. So we test the messages, we figure out what works, then we create the ads, test the ads. Once the ads work, then we put those into the field. We were also able to stand up some randomized control trials in this race really quickly because we want to use this as an opportunity to learn. We've never worked in a Supreme Court race before, and we know that Wisconsin is so important. We not only want to help win this particular race, but we want to learn for the future. So we, in addition to the work we're doing to win, we also are running 2 randomized control trials, and we did a primary survey in the field, and we'll go back to those folks on election eve. So really learning as we go. We ended up being the only organization that ran pro ads in both the primary and the general. And our engagement with our partners there helped her shift from 3rd to 1st place in the primary. We have run 24 ads. We've had over 50 million impressions. We're have a really, really incredible video completion rate of 77%, which again is, do people actually watch the videos we send them? And they do until the end. And the reason for that is because of the neuropsych that goes into how we craft them so that they're sticky. People actually want to watch the whole thing. In that race, abortion has been a core driver. Again, it's a state where abortion is banned. There is a dramatically different perspective between the 2 candidates on this. Quite shocking, actually, how conservative the Kelly is. And then we're also seeing a lot of culture wars. So it's really abortion and crime, plus in more recent weeks, some very ugly anti-trans youth ads and parents' rights work. Interestingly, we watch as pro-life groups in the state made the choice to run crime ads rather than abortion narratives, right? So the calculation they're making is that it's more effective for them to use the crime wedge than it is for them to talk about abortion specifically. That's an interesting note for where we see abortion on ballots in the future, but it also means that culture wars are coming, right? We need to be ready to do that. So in this race, OFAC tested and created ads that were designed to inoculate against those culture wars. What we did was create ads. So like against the crime narrative, we used a frame that really was designed to create a sense of safety, that this person will protect and care for you and yours, and an equal justice frame so that we're not falling into traps we don't want to be in about how we talk about candidates. So we're creating values-based ads, and then we test them in the lab against the opposition, right? So we show people both the crime narrative, and then we show them our ad, and we check to see if they see both of them, which they will in the wild, what happens? And what we see is we're able to effectively inoculate against both the crime ads and the anti-trans parents' rights narrative in the lab. So really important finding there, and we'll continue to do that work and develop it as we go forward this year. The election is next Tuesday. We have our own election eve survey of the white women, and we'll be able to look at how did they vote. And then, as I said, 2 additional RCTs in that state, which is just going to help us keep learning. And we share all of that data with folks in the field and our partners in Wisconsin so that we learn together. Okay, so now let me look ahead with you. I want to start to transition to why have we been successful so far, and then where do we go from here? And I definitely want to leave you time for questions, so I'm going to speed this part. So let me just say, I've already talked to you a lot about how research driven we are. It's very, very rigorous. It's a joy to work with the women on this team. I just want to lift up our research and comms teams. We sit together in a room and say, where's the proof of that? Do you have evidence for that? Like, you know, and we work hard to make sure that what we're saying isn't just in our heads or in our hearts, like what we wish the world was. We work hard to say, like, what does the data show? So very, very research driven approach that is multi-issue. We will talk to women about what they're worried about in a way that works for them. And if it proves to us that in doing so, we move them towards progress. And then this long-term engagement, it's quite clear that the being in conversation with women over time was a part of the secret of our success, that we didn't just come at them in the last few minutes in a crowded moment. It's not all about the elections. It's also for us about how are they understanding what's happening in the world? How do they make sense of abortion bans or, you know, parents' rights frames, and like how can we be people who they look to and who help shape their perspective on positions. So given the success, we really are now turning towards expanding our programming and scaling up. Right now we're starting some really fascinating in-depth research. We are going to be developing new ads on kitchen table issues, on culture wars, and on democracy. And we see those as interlinked, right? They're not separate. They are obviously connected. But really things for our women, inflation, can you make ends meet? Can I pay my rent? Like, can I put food on the table? And what do I do as a parent? What's happening with my kids? And what do I make sense of this backlash to equity in schools? And what about crime? Are my kids safe? And like, so the whole thing that they're worried about, how can we be their people to talk with them about how to make sense of it. And then with democracy, for our women, we're really talking to them about their role, their civic agency, their power, what they can do, and how to trust in fair elections and be a force for fair elections, so that come 2025, that we have a group of folks, voters, who will defend the sanctity of our elections and the outcome of those elections. We'll be sticking in the Rust Belt, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and expanding a little bit to states beyond. The work we'll do is going to get us to reach 4 million women starting in this summer in 2023, and that'll go on through 2024. And I am going to stop us there so I leave time for questions. Let me see. I just talked at you for so long. Whew. Okay. The first thing I'm going to answer, I'm looking at my questions that I've been given. The first thing I want to answer is, what is the research that we're doing next? So I am super excited about that. Like, in addition to all the research I just told you, we've also been working with political scientists to do a factorial analysis of the ANES data. So we're going deep into what can we figure out about these psychographic traits about our women. And then and that is fascinating, about how they view themselves, their identity, how that informs how we talk to them about different issues. The next step is we're working with our neuropsych buddies, a combination of MindBridge, FrameShift, and Gretchen Barton's group, to talk with our women about their identity, their sense of self, how it connects with these hot issues. So we'll be doing that work in the next couple of months before we turn towards a whole new range of proactive values-based communications across issues that we can be talking with folks starting in this summer. Okay, let's see. Okay, let me see. Oh, so here's a question about, will we be working in Ohio on the anticipated pro-abortion ballot measure? I love that question. I meant to say it when I was on the Ohio slide. Yeah, part of what we're looking at with our data is how did women respond to abortion, and how is that, how were we able to talk to them, and which segments were we able to connect with? And so our success with that more conservative group that is quite large in Ohio is really good news. And it's for sure something that we want to be working on. So we're watching that anticipated ballot, a pro-abortion ballot measure. It's being put through the ringer right now, but assuming it's on the ballot, we'll be developing messages and working on that ballot initiative. Here's another good question about, I'm sure all the questions are good, about the durability among voters. So I love that question. That's something that we care very much about, and we want to know the answer to, right? We spend a lot of money trying to talk with folks. Is this something that, is it always like are you building it up and then you have to start from zero, or do you actually move people to become a durable part of a multiracial coalition for progress? That question is something that we are looking to answer for ourselves. We actually have designed a 2-year longitudinal study where we want to compare our approach and look at both the folks that we talk to over time, and then separately folks that we talk to with shorter periods, shorter persuasion windows, and then try to see, are we able to create that stickiness, that durability, that base? Are we shifting the base essentially? So that is an important study. We're looking to folks to help us fund that. That's like a $3.5 million study, but it's important for the field because it could influence for all of us, like what is the smartest way to communicate with folks over time in a way that builds a durable base that will both protect our democracy and advance progress across these issues, and for everybody, right? So that's what we're looking to accomplish. I'm trying to figure out, of the different approaches we take, what are the most, financially, where's the biggest ROI? And part of that for us would include a durability question. Okay, let me see. Lots of questions. Yeah, I see there's a ton of questions about the specific ads. So you can see all of our ads on the playbook. My PAC separately has the PAC ads that we're running right now up on in the OFAC website. But just to be clear, we're not fundraising for the PAC today. So that race is separate. Let me see. Do I have some other good questions in here, Kelly? How do we get? Okay, please. So one of the questions is, how do we get the right message to the right voter, right? And so that speaks to first of all, the really smart women that work in our research division. But it's about the work that we do to figure out for each issue that we're talking about, who are the movable women? What are their core values? When we develop and test messages, which segments of women respond better to which kinds of messages? And then we're able to target those segments really specifically. The majority of the digital deployment that we do is to the individualized voter. So we have her voter ID and we say, this woman has these values and she's going to respond this way to this kinds of thing. Let's send her this ad. And so we are able to say, for this voter, let's send her she'll respond better to the nostalgia and patriotism version of this. And this woman over here is going to respond better to a care, compassion version. And so when we have both of those ads, we do the testing, we know that, then we digitally deploy them to those women. I'm kind of amazed by what's possible now in terms of digital deployment, because it allows, part of our efficiency is we're not just going up on regular TV and saying like, let's see who sees it. We're able to say, this woman watches this show, she's definitely going to be on her iPad looking at this show, Yellowstone, tomorrow night. Like, let's run our ad to her there, and then we can see, does she actually watch it, and for how long does she watch it, which tells us if we're hitting the right person, if what we're doing is something that she's responding to, or if she's just skipping it so she can get to Yellowstone, which, you know, no shame in that. All right, next question.
How do you talk about LGBTQ issues and address culture wars in your work?
Oh, I really appreciate this question. This question is, how do we talk about LGBTQ issues and address culture wars? So let me just say that what's happening on the culture war front is truly heartbreaking. It is not surprising to us, because part of the reason we were created was in response to this rising white nationalism, this use of polarizing tactics to drag us apart, to make us see each other as the other, right? That's why Galvanize was created in the first place. And part of what we've done from the beginning is pay attention to what is being used to divide us. An analysis of what's happening globally and in other countries makes it really clear there is a playbook that is being used to target folks on the other. When you make people afraid of the other, they move towards the strong man, they move towards authoritarianism. The other in other countries is quite frequently refugees or immigrants, and we see that here as well. And then we also see that in anti-Blackness around some of the crime narrative. And then the other one is gender ideology. So it's refugees and immigrants and gender ideology. Within the gender realm is reproductive freedom, and then quite clearly attacks on LGBTQ folks. Here in the, so we're seeing that in other countries as well, and the same exact language around gender invasion, gender ideology that we're seeing in other countries, we're seeing here. We're seeing it in this Wisconsin race that my PAC is in right now. We witnessed the right using some of this really virulent anti-trans. They are framing it as parents' rights. It's quite clearly anti-trans. So how do we deal with that, right? The first thing is, with everything, is we research, we talk to our women, we understand why is it working for them? How is it landing on them? How are they responding to it? How do they see themselves? Do they see themselves as someone who is compassionate and loving? Do they see themselves as someone who is pro marriage equality? The answer is yes to all of that. So if you see yourself as that, then why are you responding to anti-trans narratives that tell you that you know, that teachers are grooming your kids, or that schools are allowing your children to transition without your knowledge, right? So what they're positioning it as is a fear or threat of the other, that this woke folks on the far left are going to come in, invade, disrupt like your own values and family, and make your children unsafe. For our women, the way we talk to them about it, and we've, you know, as I said, tested and proven that it's successful, is we talk to them about, what's your common sense here? Like, what do you want to be true? As a mother or a grandmother, you want your kids to be safe. Is that the real threat, right? Like, so how do we talk to them about how they want to protect their children? What does it look like? What do they want for their children? What they don't want is, you know, what they look for is common sense, hopeful solutions for their family to be okay. And they perceive themselves as folks who are pro-marriage equality and pro-inclusion, right? They do not want to be people who are bigoted or racist or ugly to the other. That's not how they see themselves. So how do we say to them, like, look, these politicians are coming in, they're meddling in schools, they're just using our kids to make trouble. These aren't common sense things, right? So we're able to talk to them about that. We can link it to book banning, which everybody's against. It's an in-depth kind of really psychological response to what's really going on here, and who are you and what do you want? And what we think is there's so much opportunity. We've done a number of surveys on this issue, message testing, and as I said, testing against opposition. And what we're seeing is, by talking to folks about their values, what they want in the world for their kids and grandkids, what they think is common sense, and what they don't want from meddling politicians, we're able to connect with them and say, that's not it. Now let's get serious about things that we do need for our family and who's going to provide them for our family. And that's been pretty successful so far. And we're going to keep, I commit to all of you, this is important to us. We did it with the critical race theory very successfully. We're going to continue to build out on this because we will help folks make a different choice. And we need to be the ones that offer an alternative. There's some ugliness happening. They're being offered an alternative that says, you know, be afraid, come with us. We have to say, no, don't be afraid. That's not what you need to do. Come with us because we want to create this better world, and so do you. And that's what we offer.
Last question, yeah. Do we share our resources? It was asked about the Democratic Party, but in general. And then...
Okay, last question is, do we share our resources? So yes, we do. You know we do. We have a Galvanize Action puts up all of our tested messages and ads up on our playbook. I'm sure we have that in the chat. Everything that we create, our ethos is scale by sharing. We put stuff up there so that you can have it. We want folks to use it. By making it public, we make it available to public officials or candidates. If they want to take a look at it, they can. We're very much trying to help the field build a group of folks who will protect democracy and advance progress. And so anything you heard today, we have partnerships at an impact manager, Jenna, we can put her information in there, but just go to the playbook, check it out. We're always happy to share with you. And in any, I'll just say at the end of that, we don't think we need to be everywhere. You know, we're getting bigger, we're scaling up, we're doing great work, but part of what we're trying to do is share what we're creating so that folks in other states outside of where we're going to act in 23 and 24 can also succeed. So we've just shared what we have around around these culture wars to folks working in Florida, and we're always willing to share our research, our messages. We'll white label our ads. If we're not working in a state, we want this stuff that's proven effective in the hands of our allies. So with that, let me just say to you that costs money. This is not a fundraising call per se, but I am working hard to raise the money we need in our C4 Galvanize Action to do all this ongoing research and message development and testing that we can get out so that other folks can take it and use it, and we can take the success that we've proven and really scale it. So I hope you will consider, if you're not already donating to Galvanize Action, become part of the community, and let's win together. Okay. Thank you so much. We will definitely be back in touch after next week's Wisconsin results happen. I think I just really want to end by saying thank you. With all the culture wars and the stuff that is hard, it matters that we're in this together with you, that we are a community, that we are all collaborating and sharing, and that we can win together. So thank you very much for being here today. And I'll talk to you soon.